Actually, we've had some happy times and some extremely unhappy times and terribly sorrowful times, because my dear wife of so many years died about a month ago. And so I will dedicate this to her. Having experienced the end of an era, in the truest sense, end of an era, what's ahead? Well, fortunately there's an awful lot of people in this very same predicament, and a bunch of them right here in this neighborhood, who've lost a spouse of many, many years. Some of them just play golf all the time. But golf, to me, wonderful game, but that's what it is, it's a game. And there's a limit to how much you can play any game, I would think, and consider yourself fully adult and earning your way in this world. So that didn't appeal. Some time back, let's call it a year ago, I was tending to the bills, and a lady was doing some faux painting repair in a room we call the media room. And I don't know what possessed me. It's such an odd thing, but I asked her, do you know any sculptors who would be willing to teach someone? She said, to my surprise, she said, oh, absolutely. We have a person in Stewart, and he's terrific. So that got me started with sculpting. I went and met him. He's a local person. He's what you call a portrait sculptor. Now, sculpture is a difficult medium of art. And portrait sculpture is especially difficult because it's a more or less realistic presentation of something real. So you've got something to look at, and then you've got the sculpture that this person created to look at, and you can compare them, and you don't need to be terribly astute to see sometimes that they bear no resemblance to each other. So I've been pursuing it with a lesson just about every week. And when my wife became very, very ill, sometimes that would get disrupted, but it was always a chance to get a little breather. Right before my wife died, I did get an invite to go visit my brother. So I went up to visit my brother. I drove up there. I drove half the way in one day and the other half of the way in the second day to a place north of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We went to the Harley-Davidson Museum, saw a lot of sculpture at another museum, which is at a School of Engineering. It's works that have to do with workers. So it's sculpture and painting that have to do with workers, and it would be like people knitting, people puddling, that's in the steel industry before the Bessemer oven. People would make the steel that way. People banging on an anvil, all that kind of stuff. But then the second half of the visit was not good. So I had to, actually I had to leave at 10:30 in the evening. On a very cold, rainy day, I left and I drove all the way back here to Florida in one day. Yeah, and then it was a good thing because this was the last time I spent with my wife. So the art has been real helpful, and now, for better or worse, I have more time for it, and I intend to visit some friends that are, some of them artists, some of them have galleries, one is a museum, kind of get caught up in the world of art. Yeah. And I also want to enter some competitions. It was almost a year ago that this piece here was shown in my teacher's studio. It was not in the bronze, but it was in the plaster and wax mixture, the plastiline. And a number of visitors came through the studio in this annual studio walk. And so I asked my teacher afterwards if anyone made any comments about my piece, because it was the only piece I had showing in his studio. He said, yes. He didn't get a real happy look on his face. Yes, he said, there were some criticisms. There were. I said, well, what did they say? He said, well, they pretty much devolved about two criticisms. One was the breasts were completely unrealistic. And I said, well, what was the other one? He said, well, the genitalia were not right. I said, well, who's making these criticisms? Oh, he said, women. They were all women making these criticisms. So I said, well, I'll fix the genitalia. This art thing has appealed to my wife and me a long, long time ago. In the beginning, we couldn't afford, original art, so we'd just make some of our own, and we had the children's art and so forth. It's a big family, this art thing. You have the museum director. We've always supported museums, so we have some good friends in that capacity. There's the artist himself or herself, as a studio makes art. We've always visited artists in different places, even foreign countries. Art is part of, our culture, part of our civilization. Oh, and then you get crossovers. I'd be a crossover, because see, I was a collector for many, many years with my wife, and now I'm making some art. I like making art. I know kinesthesia, I know psychology, I know disease. I mean, I know enough that I don't have to learn that. I know that. And I don't think I could be on this trip if it weren't for that. In fact, if you look at this figure, if you look at this upper arm, I don't know if you can see this, but this upper arm has been fractured, probably in childhood. So you'll see an angle of the upper humerus with the lower 2/3 of the humerus, which you don't see on this side. Here the humerus is straight. Now I don't think everybody necessarily see that, but I see that. And so I can correct things. So the next one I do, and I've got 2 waxes of this same figure, the next one I do, I'm going to set that bone straight, and I'm just going to attribute this to trauma in childhood. I'm going to put a little bit of pressure upon some people I know who are deans of medical schools and societies to consider the possibility of trying in a medical school, having a group of doctors in training, or maybe it's postgraduate and they're surgeons in residency, just try sculpture and say if it enhanced their ability to see, if it sharpened in any way usable skills, say for physical medicine and rehabilitation specialist watching a patient walk away from him or her, watching the gait and seeing that one shoulder's a little bit odd, the humerus, it's not right. But sharpening that eye, because it has done a wonder for me. So medicine, which is, remember, an art and a science. It is said that to the students especially, that don't think this is a science. It isn't. Mathematics is not a science, and neither is medicine. It is a melding of a craft and of an art, and science. It hopefully has solid scientific underpinnings. Yes, big help. Makes it more fun for me too. I mean, art should hopefully be beautiful. Matisse said, be beautiful, be uplifting, be expensive. I like to explore mythical themes. So I have, for example, a piece, Europa and the Bull. Europa was a young Phoenician princess. Pardon me, that's Asia Minor. And she was playing on the beach, privileged, playing on the beach. Undoubtedly a wealthy, powerful father somewhere, mother somewhere. And Zeus came along, and Zeus wanted to carry her off. It's mythological, and it lends itself to an artistic representation. So the young princess is on the back of the bull. So the art hopefully is pretty to look at. It's beautiful. What is art? I mean, what is art? See, what is art? Well, the best I can come up with, and this is just my own version of this, is art is a kind of a language. It expresses something. And if you aren't expressing it to someone who's getting it on the other side, it probably isn't what you think it is. It does so. So if you fill a whole house with your own art and no one ever sees it and you never talk about it, I don't think that's exactly what art is supposed to be. It's something inside of you that apparently wants to come out, and it's a worthy pursuit, and it makes me feel good. I mean, it makes me feel real good. It's creative. I don't know how many more years I have, but I'd really like to be doing this for another 10 or 20 years. I really would. But not to sell it, not to necessarily even give it away, don't mind that, but just to make it. And I think that probably is getting pretty close to being what an artist is supposed to be, is making it.